Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Love Talks. For this month of June, I am pleased to introduce Lane Cuthbert, who's going to be joining me tonight. And we're talking about love and relationships and money, which usually causes a little bit of cringe for people when they hear about those two topics together. But it's such a necessary conversation because stats don't lie, and the majority of relationships end due to disparity around finances and money. So we're going to help root some of that out tonight, and Lane's going to throw down some of his wisdom as to how we can actually create a really solid foundation through, I'm sure, communication and a couple of other things that he's going to share with us so that it's not so uncomfortable and so hard for us. So I want to give you a little background on Lane before we get started. Let me just pull up his bio here because it's something I don't want to get wrong. So Lane has a bachelor's of theology and his license for investments and insurance in the province of BC and Alberta. He is also an ordained representative for legalizing marriages, has started and sold several businesses, and is tackling a fresh new vision to mentor millennials to be the richest generation ever. With 10 years of pastoral ministry in his background and a passion for business, he has structured his company and partnerships to offer wise counsel in an affordable way to help as many people as possible to succeed with their finances. His start with you and your goals first, love it. Transparent approach has led him to be named a top 3 financial service company in the Langley area and top advisor for assets under management in his first year of business, managing approximately $3 million. We're talking to the right man, people. We're talking to the right man. Thanks so much, Lane, for joining us tonight. I'd love for you to share. Oh, pleasure is all mine. I'd love for you to jump right in with what inspired you to have this sort of journey that I just shared with everybody.
Absolutely. So for me personally, I found my faith in church, and I got swept up at a young age drinking and doing drugs, and I actually played a high level of sport, and I didn't love what that feeling of being hungover the next day when I need to perform at the highest level and I can't. And but I was still kind of searching for a lot of answers, and I found a comfortable place in a church. And my home life at that time, my parents divorced. My dad's been through a couple of marriages, and so I actually didn't enjoy hanging out at home. And so I found a really safe place that I could hang out, and I identified a lot with that. But my natural tendency is to gravitate towards leadership. So when I saw a pastor, I thought, that's what I want to do with my whole life. I want to help people. And in the same way that this has helped me, I want to be able to do the same for others. And so I got into pastoring, and I realized that I don't have the emotional, thick enough skin to handle that, that it was very draining on me personally. And I identified really early that if I don't change my career path, I'm going to burn out excessively. And so I actually had the rare opportunity. I came into an inheritance of about $180,000. And there's a proverb that says a wise man leaves an inheritance for his children's children. And I thought, I definitely want to do that. This money's going to open doors for me, and I wanted to do the same for my kids and for my kids' kids. And I got connected with a financial advisor. And after him managing my money for a few years, he actually invited me to be a part of his team. And now it's the best of both worlds. I've actually come into my full purpose where I get to help people. I get to help, manage their finances, give them wisdom on how to actually manage their money. And then what we'll kind of get into is the opportunity for me to also help them have healthy and strong relationships by identifying and conversations, financial date nights, so that they can actually thrive in their relationships. And I still get to help people, but there's a lot less of that emotional drag side on the other end. So it's the best of both worlds for me.
Amazing. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, I'm always fascinated by people's path and journey, and how lovely that you found one that's brought you to your full purpose. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So at the beginning, go ahead.
Just throw in a So yeah, and then when I pastored for 10 years, I am an ordained minister. So I kept my credentials, and I kept my ordination, and a friend of mine bought an officiant company and said, hey, you look good in a suit and you can handle a microphone. Will you come work for me? So I probably perform between 30 and 50 weddings a year as well.
Oh, that's so awesome. I love it. And so there's
Yeah.
also the option of providing that additional support should those people choose to come to you for that as well. So
Absolutely.
how amazing is that? Oh, yeah, it's such a joy-filled day. That must be fun to be a part of.
It's really not that hard, with the first meetings, like getting to know them, seeing if they're going to go with our company. You're sort of drinking beer or you're drinking coffee, asking them to recant their love story to you. And then the last time they see you, you're pronouncing them as husband and wife. So it's not a hard job, really.
It's amazing. I love it. Who says your job has to be hard? So I love that you're finding someone that you're bringing so much joy for other people and providing a service and in turn getting it back. That's awesome. Yeah. So I want to dive right in because we talked about, leading up to the talk tonight, I shared a little bit of statistics surrounding how, sadly, a lot of relationships, whether it be a divorce or just an ending of a relationship, which is traumatic unto itself, a lot of the reasoning behind it can be tied back to a disparity in value systems or how they operate with their own money and finance in their life. So can you speak to that a little bit? And so I'd like to kind of root out why that happens. And I know you shared an amazing analogy with me that I love and I've shared with other people. So we definitely want to talk about that. But let's talk about kind of the why behind it. And if we know this, how come we keep on doing it?
Right. So, yeah, well, the statistics are it's between 51 and 52% of marriages end in divorce right now. And the number one reason is finance related. And inside the church, that number is about 36%. And actually the results of the reason why the divorce is still the same. And so a lot of people were like, well, of those 52%, is it because they went bankrupt? Is it because they made some bad investments? Like they must just think it's this bomb that blows up. And the reality is it's actually because what I consider the unspoken expectations. You come into this relationship and it seems to be such a taboo topic that nobody feels comfortable talking about their finances, especially at the dating phase. So then you get into it and then everybody kind of has, you've had like the skin deep level kind of conversation, are you a saver or are you a spender? I don't know. Like they've rarely even had the basic conversation. So then what ends up happening is you get into it and maybe you find that there's some debt that they didn't tell you about, or they mismanage money so badly that they actually are like a hole in your financial ship. So you might be great with your finances. Your parents have done a great job teaching you. And then you love this person, get into this relationship and you're like, oh, well, it's too late now. Like we're bound together and their bad habits are actually dragging my success down. And I think that that's where a lot of the tensions come in, is there isn't this same wavelength conversation where we're on the same page about how we feel about finances, what we should spend our money on, and defining what rich means to us. Because if we don't define it for ourselves, someone else will define it for us. And if you have competing forces not on the same page about how you should spend your money, then I think it just adds this additional pressure that can actually just be like a deep seed. And then in the middle of an argument, it might sprout a little bit. And then in the middle of another argument, it might grow a little bit more. And the next thing you know, you're dealing with this monster and you have no idea how to actually handle it. And then I think a lot of people just think it's easier to start over again and kind of pull the plug.
Yeah. Yeah, but that doesn't help anything either because you're still not addressing the issue off the get.
Absolutely.
Or cleaning up your own stuff. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's not your troubles. What is it? Your troubles follow you wherever you go. So you need to be addressing your own stuff. So let's start there. You've got a lot of fans popping on. It's Lane. Yay, Lane. So
that's a couple of my clients, young couple that are in their first year of being married. They're fantastic. Robin runs a brilliant business. They've actually both worked for nonprofit organizations. And Robin runs a fantastic business teaching music, very talented singer and piano player. So yeah, it's nice to see that there are some people that I know on here as well.
Amazing. So as comments come up, I'll pop them up. And if people have questions, I encourage you to ask them throughout the duration of our hour together. because that's the whole purpose behind Love Talks, is to have conversations that matter, that help open up, expand, educate, and support you in your romantic life. So please capitalize on Lane being with us this evening to ask any of your questions, because this is a tough topic. So you touched on dating a little and how it can even be difficult then. So if you were speaking to someone that was starting to dip their toe into that realm, I know even with my own coaching, it's about cleaning up your own stuff and fully embodying what you're wanting in a partner, in yourself. And that can mean cleaning up your finances. If you look at your money and it makes you really uncomfortable, that's probably a great area to start. Do you want to expand on that a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. And I find that there's a lot of analogies that are closely tied with finances, with dieting and health and wellness. And it's the reality is, like, if you eat pizza, 3 meals a day, you're just pigging out on food, you're not in good shape at all. You could get into a relationship with somebody who's fit and who cares about wellness and longevity, and you can ride the coattails of that person, but you put in a lot of excess pressure on that person. And if for some reason, they ever lose motivation, then you're just actually going to be the slippery slope that's going to drag them back down. Because if you're not actually taking care of yourself first, I just think it's ludicrous to think that someone else has the responsibility to take care of you. I think that what we should do is actually bring our very best to a relationship. And then I call it the LeBron James theory. But LeBron James doesn't need to know how to play badminton. He doesn't need to be well-rounded in multiple sports. He just needs to be the best at basketball. So play to your strengths and hire for your weaknesses. If you have natural gifts and abilities, you should be the very best at those things, but you should hone and refine those. And then actually let the relationship that you're in complement the weaknesses that you naturally have. But instead of us coming in just expecting that someone else is going to carry the whole load, you're going to put a lot of excess pressure on the relationship. And I find that one thing that I do say in a lot of the marriage scripting that I've done and performed is, marriage isn't a 50-50 thing. Like, if I do my portion and you do yours, then we'll cover everything. But what always winds up happening is some gray area in the middle where I thought you were going to have that. No. That was your responsibility. That's in your 50%. No. The idea is you got to bring 100%. You have to put your very best in to get your very best out. And I think that's where we should start, is what can I do to make myself marriable? What can I do to make myself as attractive as possible, not just physically, but also, tactically, with finances and with wellness and longevity, so that I don't bring that excess stress into a relationship. Yeah, being our best self for sure. But, to challenge that theory a little, someone could be really bad with money because they weren't raised with that skill set. And heaven knows that we're not really empowered with that knowledge in school. We don't graduate from high school or unless we go into post-secondary with a focus on economics or something else to support us in that area. So what are some ways that someone can use an honest lens in reviewing their strengths when it comes to money, so that when they're even coming, and we're going to talk about how to communicate and show up on a date before you even get to the marriage train, if that's where you want to go, what are some ways that they can look with an honest lens as to, some things are obvious. If you're struggling and you're living paycheck to paycheck, then there's probably some digging around to do. But what are some other questions or things that people can look at to see that they're being accountable and making wise investments in themselves with regards to finance in their life? Yeah. So what I would say is that in any dynamic, sort of to answer the first question that you were saying about what if you're naturally not very good with finances, I would say that my wife, if she needed to, would be great with finances. But naturally, she's not a numbers. She's very creative. She can take a blank page and it doesn't threaten her at all. She can turn it into a beautiful masterpiece of art. But she doesn't want to do finances. But she still has a responsibility that she can't fully detach from how our finances actually work. So I think that sort of answers the question of what we can do to put that accountability in place. I think everyone should own or read a basic finance book. Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Like there's ample opportunities that are out there. It's very simple reads that are going to give you the basics, like almost finances for dummies. You got to actually take the responsibility that whether I'm great at this or I'm not great at this, because if you're great at this, you're doing self-directed investing. You know that you're doing a great job. You're already doing due diligence on the most effective products that you can have as part of your portfolio. But if you're not good at finance and you've identified that because you're like, I don't know where my money goes, which is probably the first red flag you should be aware of. Is it's not just, I live paycheck to paycheck. It's, I don't know what my money does every month. I could have some in an account, but if I actually can't tell you the purpose of why I work and what I'm working towards and how many months, hours, and days it's going to take for me to accomplish the goal I'm going for, start there. That's going to be the red flag that says maybe I should just buy a book like Finance for Dummies or a real popular book about how to handle my finances. Thumb your way through. You don't need to master everything, but at least it gets you in the conversation, and then you can have the basics. Because the last thing you want to do is come into a relationship and maybe you end up with somebody with a strong suit in finance. If you just say, I don't know what my money does and I don't care, well, that's actually going to be a kind of a turnoff to someone who actually does know what they're doing with their money and is very well aware, because then they know that they have the responsibility to actually manage yours. Now, I have seen relationships where somebody will actually come in and they're responsible for managing all the household dollars. And because the other spouse totally detaches, what ends up happening is if something traumatic happens, say that person passes away, then the spouse has absolutely no idea how to pay the bills, no idea how to manage the money, and that's not going to be a good situation. But I've also seen in the other regard that there's no level of accountability. So then what ends up happening is that one spouse might do some spending that the other spouse doesn't know about, make some bad investments and not tell the other spouse because of pride, because of embarrassment. And then what ends up happening is it's way too late down the road that you're dealing with this massive ball of debt that's going to be hard to recover from, and then possibly declaring bankruptcy or worse. So,
yeah, I love that. So what I'm hearing is accountability, responsibility, transparency. So let's talk about how we show up and start communicating those things when we start dipping our toe into the dating field. When do you have these discussions?
Well, I think this is a good time for that analogy that you enjoyed so much. So let me ask you this question. Do you towel off in the shower or out of the shower?
In the shower.
You feel like because I've asked you this before, you're confident with your answer now.
I'm like, in the shower. Because last time I had to think about it, I'm like, no one's asked me that before.
Yeah, you weren't that fast when I asked you the first time.
No, I wasn't.
Well, maybe we'll ask it to the people that are watching. Do you towel off in the shower or out of the shower?
Don't be shy, folks. We'll maybe keep on rolling with it as they shyly say yes or no or what they do.
Okay. So the reason that I asked that question is it's an unspoken expectation, because I towel off outside the shower. That's what that little towel is outside the shower. I can drip on that. Robin in the shower. There you go. Just wait for it. Dylan's going to say out for sure. And so, yeah, what ends up happening is that's why I have that little towel outside of the shower, because that's where I drip off. That's where I stand. And then I towel off outside the shower. But if you towel off inside the shower, and I had a roommate when I was in college, and we had some fierce fights about this, but he towels off inside the shower, because when you come back to the sink, first thing he does is he towels off, then he goes into his room, puts his clothes on, comes back with a fresh pair of socks on, and then goes to brush his teeth. If you've got these little water droplets all over the floor and you step in one of those, man, I've never seen somebody lose their mind. Now you got to change your socks. You're like just absolutely irate about the whole situation. And you can't fathom for any reason why some idiotic person would towel off outside of the shower, because your mom towels off in the shower, your dad towels off in the shower, you were raised your whole life toweling off in the shower, and because it's a conversation that nobody has, you believe that everybody in the world must towel off inside the shower. And that sort of shapes the future, so that when you find out that someone doesn't towel off inside the shower, your whole world is up in flames. So it can absolutely be the same with finances, because what I find is People can have lots of money and still think that they don't have anything. Or people can have nothing and think that they have all the riches in the world. And so that's probably a great place to start, is dig into the unspoken expectations. Maybe ask yourself that question. How did I grow up with money? Did we take, what defines rich would be, did we take vacations every year? Did I ever have to go to the food bank for dinner? Did we own our house or did we rent? Like, determine what that line of what rich is and what rich is not, and then ask yourself on which end you grew up on, and then ask yourself, did I grow up recognizing what side I grew up on? Did I have the gratitude that I was born into one of the richest nations in the world, that I was born into a country with freedom, that we had money, we never had to go to the food bank, we never went hungry? Or do I have that entitlement mentality? Oh, well, my parents bought me a car and then I crashed it, and then they bought me another car, but I wanted it in blue and they bought it in red. So I think that answer that question for yourself. And then when you go on a date, it's a great opportunity to ask some of those questions. Hey, as we kind of get into dinner a little bit and we're having a conversation, and what was it like when you were growing up? What did you guys do for summer vacations? Did you take any summer vacations? Oh, we used to tent in the backyard. Flag. Like, there probably wasn't a ton of money to be flying to Hawaii every year. What did you do? Oh, every 2 years we would go down to Disney World, and then we do Disney World, and then we go on a cruise. It was nothing. I mean, I know some people that would go to Europe every year or Hawaii every opportunity they had. So we didn't really grow up with much. You'll hear it in the tone of their voice about their attitude towards money. And I think that those will be identifying keys to help you sort of parallel the beginning of the conversation. And then as the relationship starts to progress and gets a little bit more serious, you have the level of respect and understanding to actually go to the next level and actually be more upfront with those conversations. How do you view debt? Do you have any debt? Do you live paycheck to paycheck? How do you manage? Like, what percentage of your finances do you allocate towards savings? Do you have a plan that dictates what every dollar does before a paycheck comes in? Or do you just sort of wing it?
Right. And I can see that's where people can get sort of like choked up, because it's easy for us to maybe like the initial, what you suggested is sort of leading down the path a little bit of dancing around the rose bush, because you're asking questions, and you need to be careful that you don't fall into the trap of making assumptions though either.
Absolutely.
But then asking those more direct questions, I think that's where people get scared. Like, it's either they've got their own hangups or difficulties with mindset around money, or they're afraid that if they ask, they might offend someone. So where do you think that, like, that concern about, either the shame originates from, where we're scared to share, or the origins of offending someone because money's something, for some reason, somewhere back when, we weren't supposed to talk about it, but it's such a big part of relationship and life.
Yeah, it's like like the Downton Abbey. Of that era, you just either you had it or you didn't. You either had servants serving you or you were served, but you would never tell people how much you actually had. But I think where the pride comes in is we're living in this Instagram generation. So I actually think that it's actually getting a lot worse than ever before, because everybody's personifying how great they are. We're showing all of our highlight reels, and nobody gets to see the outtakes behind the scenes. So, you can follow any motivational Instagram feed, and they're posting pictures of Lamborghinis and Ferraris and these, $800,000 yachts. And they're like, you can do it. You just got to believe. And you're like, okay, like, if I just dream of this boat, I should be able to get it. And then, adulthood sets in. You're in your mid 30s. You're like eating ramen noodles for the 4th time that week. Like, cockroaches scurry along the road. And you're like, I thought if I dreamed about this, like, I would be on my yacht by now. Why don't I have this? So I think that there's a disconnect between how easy it is to make money and how much you can actually accumulate in a small amount of time. And then I think that society is kind of putting that pressure on us, that it's like, I found the same thing when I was 18. It's like, you're about to graduate. you better have your whole life figured out. And how dare you pick, a major at university and then change it because you need to know right now what you're going to do. I turned 30 last year. I was like, I am just settling in to finally finding it out. I was 28 when I kind of got into the industry. I was like, yes, I finally found what I wanted to do. I can't put that kind of pressure on, but those sorts of pressures are on relationships with how people actually manage their finances. And I think individually. So I think that's where that pride comes in, is that sense of, oh, I thought I'd be further along by now. Society tells me that I should have it sorted out by now. If I want to retire at 35, man, I don't want to tell this, this girl that I really like that I actually don't, make enough to provide that white picket fence lifestyle. I'm not going to be able to buy our first house. Is it going to be the $12 million place in Lonsdale that overlooks the water and we can boat into downtown for work? Like, we got to set real expectations. We got to realize, maybe this is actually a really great example. So my in-laws have worked hard their whole lives. They've done really great with their savings, but now that they're approaching that retirement age, they're sort of semi-retired. Now they'll go to California for a long weekend. And I'm sitting at home being like, I want to go to California for a long weekend. I would love to go to the Hunter Valley, do some wine tasting for a couple hours and then hop on my jet back home. But I'm not at that phase of life. When they were 30, they were, grinding away, building homes, flipping homes. They were actually accumulating wealth. That's the phase that we're in, is wealth accumulation. And that was just a side anecdote. I think that where the shame comes in with the debt is that people aren't being honest, and they actually just take on more and more debt. And then when they actually think about the number and they think about what it takes to actually get debt free, I think it concerns them that they don't want to scare someone away by actually being truthful about how much debt they have. And then the shame sets in that, oh, I can't afford these things, but I want them so bad that I'm willing to take on this massive amount of debt. And then hopefully this other person doesn't actually find out how much debt I have to serve my immediate selfish nature, that I must have that and I can't be deprived of it.
Yeah, that whole keeping up with the Joneses kind of thing. And I think when people are dating, a lot of the time they're trying to keep up this facade of what they think was appealing to someone else. So let's touch on the topic of value, because you talked about what's happening on social media and definitely in media in general, where we're shown sort of this, for very few people, like definitely not the majority, is it obtainable to be living like a rock star. So it puts this almost subconscious messaging on high that this is what we're supposed to all be doing and obtaining to be of value, that we're not valuable until we have a lot of stuff or do a certain thing. So if someone's struggling with their own inner dialogue about what value is, what advice would you have?
Yeah. Sorry, is this plane annoying? We're right by an airplane, right by an airport. So I think it's fading away. Let me know if it's annoying.
I think it's past now.
Okay, great. So a question that I really like to ask is, what does rich mean to you? So when we spend on, and this is maybe like a very practical opportunity for someone to apply this if they haven't defined what rich means to them. But if you spend on credit card, what ends up happening is we're disconnected from our spending. So every event that comes up in our life has equal authority. I have to be at that wedding. I have to be at that birthday party. I have to buy that person a gift. I have to. And next thing you know, you're actually spending money that you don't have just to try and keep up. And a prime example is like being a bridesmaid or a groomsman. It's one thing if you're the best man or the maid of honor. That's a really honorable position. You obviously have a very deep relationship to be asked to be in that role. But if you're asked to be the bridesmaid and their wedding party is 7 people and you're at the very end, you're probably not that great of a friend, but it's still going to cost you maybe $1,000 all said and done.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Well, and we're starting to kind of get into it, right? That sense of it's really hard to have those questions because we always feel like, oh, I have to do this. There's that sense that I have to be a bridesmaid. Well, if you have a budget in place and say it's going to take you, 24 months to have a down payment on the, getting into the housing market. Well, if this wedding with the bachelor party, with the dress that you need to get, with the gift that you need to get, if it's going to set you back $1,500 or $2,000, that's an extra couple of months that you hadn't planned on. And that's where we start to get to the real crux of the question. What does rich mean to you? Are friendships rich to you? Then absolutely you should delay your goals and spend on what you're being asked to be a part of. But if owning a house and accumulating wealth is more important to you, then you know what you could say? Hey, thank you so much for the opportunity, but it's actually not in my budget to be able to afford to be a part of this wedding. You need to step aside the pride to realize that I don't want to spend money on stuff that actually doesn't help me get to the goal that I want to get to. I want my money to only go to the things that are most important to me. So when I work with a lot of clients, I put them like their cash spending, their fun money. I actually tell them, take it in cash out of an ATM, because when you spend on cash, I'll say this, when you spend on card, there's a chemical imbalance that happens in the brain. So when you spend, the chemical dopamine is released in the brain, which is associated with pleasure. So that's why they call it shopping therapy. You're having a terrible day, you start buying. Weird, I actually physically feel better about myself right now. But then your body likes to be in a state of equilibrium. So when dopamine is released in the brain, a chemical called cortisol is released in the brain, which is associated with stress and anxiety. And that's when you get buyer's remorse. 2 hours later, oh my gosh, what did I spend? What can I return? And you're totally freaking out about the whole thing. So when you spend on cash, you actually tap into a logical side of the brain that you're doing a statistical calculation when you go to make a purchase. If I've only got $2.50 in my pocket and I go to Starbucks and I order, the grande orange mocha frappuccino, and it's going to be $3, I either change the size of the drink, change my drink, or get nothing at all. But whatever I do, there's an interaction, an exchange of dollars for goods. And then I know that I get all the benefit of the good that I paid for without the chemical imbalance in my brain. And so when it comes to the actual spending, that's what we need to define for ourselves, is what is rich. And maybe I'll give this example to help clarify that a little bit. To be frank, I don't give a damn what I drive. I would ride a bicycle if I had to, because I hate putting gas in a car. I take care of my cars because I want them to last forever, but I'm looking for value. I will be the Toyota Camry driving down the road, regardless of my personal net worth. But I've got a client, he's in his mid-20s and he's a computer engineer, and rich to him is driving a Ferrari. Okay, that's great, but we do a financial plan, and I tell him, listen, if you want to drive a Ferrari, you could do that, but you're not going to afford a house. You can't do both. So you tell me, what's more important? Are you okay to live in your mom's basement suite, with all your buddies ragging on you that you still live with your mom, but you drive a Ferrari? He's like, yeah, I love my mom. Great. It's not for me to tell you how to spend your money, but that's him telling me what rich means. Because every time he's behind the wheel of his car, he feels like $1 million. He feels great. It charges his batteries. He feels rich, like work is actually paying off. I'm okay to go in on the dreaded Mondays, the Monday blues, because I know that every time that I put in an hour and more money comes out, it's actually serving my opportunity to drive the car that I love, which actually just charges my batteries.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. So, that's an honest conversation to be having with yourself, even going into the dating realm, is value to you in your life, or what feels rich, and then associating that with even who you're choosing to date. Like, what do you find valuable in someone else, and then making peace with that.
It's actually a prime bit of conversation to be had as well at that same sort of dinner. Is, okay, I know what rich means to me. I don't want to drive a Ferrari ever, regardless of how much money I make. I can make $10 million an hour tomorrow. I'm not driving a Ferrari. But then you have that conversation. Hey, what are your interests? Try and find out where they spend their money and what they spend it on. Oh, I love really great food. I would spend $100 a plate. Okay, you're a foodie. But now you kind of go in knowing that if that's what charges their batteries and they love eating a great meal, well, on what other areas are they going to need to make sure that they're skimping on or being, budget conscious on, to make sure that they have the money to fund the stuff that they love to do.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I love that. I remember listening to someone once talking about the Mint app, and for any of you that are not familiar with what Mint is, it's an app that helps you maintain and manage a budget, so you can see how you're spending your money, and it helps keep you in check a little bit if that's not a muscle you have well exercised yet. And listening to someone talking about it and them saying, looking at it and seeing where you're spending your money is a great representation of what you value in your life. So if it's going out with friends all the time, then that's high value in your life. If it's going out and shopping and having things, then that's high value in your life. And that's fine as long as you're shopping within or going out with friends within your means. But having that value conversation on a first date could be, first or second date could be hugely helpful. So
yeah, absolutely.
So someone starts dating and they've had a conversation and they feel like they're kind of on the same page, or at least they complement each other in how they manage money. They're being transparent and they're continuing to date. And so you talked about money dates and doing them together. Do you want to speak about that a bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. The ideal situation is that once you actually get into that shared finances, that there should be the opportunity that both of you are actually sitting down, paying the bills, that you watch money flowing out of the accounts so that you're both aware of where everything is at. But the reality is there usually is someone who likes to do the finances or has been told to do the finances, and the other person who doesn't really want to do them. But again, like, to avoid that very awkward situation where something detrimental happens to the primary finance manager, I find that whoever wants to do the finances needs to report to the person who doesn't want to do the finances, and you need to report in such a way that you attract their attention. So for my wife, it's a prime example. I'm a financial advisor. We know who does the finances in our house. But I have the responsibility to report to my wife on where our money goes, how much was spent in the certain categories, and then the opportunity for me to actually lay it out in a format that attracts her attention. It's got colors, it's got graphs, so that she understands in a language, because if I just show her a spreadsheet, she'll glaze over and forget it. We're not having a conversation. And when the hard conversations come up, and this is where your relationships gets pressed by the economy, really. But if somebody maybe loses a job, or if you take a dip in income, and then you feel the pressing of those finances where you still have bills that need to be paid, this is where you pull out a nice bottle of wine, open the bottle, sit down at the table, pour a couple of glasses, and actually just set the tone of the conversation first. We have the full right to be truthful and honest on where our finances are, and work through this with understanding. And I think if you lay out those expectations first, this is going to be difficult for me. Just if you start with that, you've already done half the battle of making the conversation a lot easier to say, hey, listen, I haven't told you about this, but I got $50,000 in debt from a bad investment that I did in Bitcoin. It's like, okay, well, now we know about it. Now we can do teamwork. Now we can work together to determine how we're going to actually solve this problem. And if you need to actually take a minute, sip on your wine, let emotions cool down. But we come back to the table to always finish that conversation, because trust me, it's like ripping the Band-Aid off. You rip it off, it might hurt in the moment, but you're gonna be able to deal with the problem sooner. If you wait till gangrene sets in before you pull that Band-Aid off, it could be too late at that point. So anything, I need help. It doesn't need to be complex. It could be very basic, but you got to find an environment that's safe. You got to set the tone and expectation. Sometimes I know some couples that will actually write out the expectations of their date night, and then they review them real quick before they have that conversation. Listen, we can say what we need to say. If there's some hidden expenses that you spent, I'm going to come with understanding. I might not be happy in the moment, but I'm going to believe that, this is the best by us talking about this and then identifying why you spent that. Okay, I had a really terrible day. I was so stressed out at work. I just went shopping and I spent $500 because I wanted to feel better. Okay, thank you for telling me that. But now next time you have a stressful day, how can I help support you in this relationship so that you don't just go off the rails and go spend $500, but we deal with this in a healthy and dynamic way so that we can actually accomplish this together as a team, as opposed to me just waiting until this surprise credit card comes and debt is too heavy. And then I think, okay, and this is what I'm saying, like if I'm in the good, money management position and someone is still working through their issues, well, once we're committed to each other, your issues are my issues. I better get on board to help you, or else that's me just kind of saying, like, I've got one hand on the chute ready to pull out of this relationship.
Yeah, I love that. So many little nuances weaving their way through what you were saying. So, I mean, that's commitment.
Absolutely.
Commitment to each other, commitment to each party showing up regardless of what's going on, and then being prepared to have the conversation. But I love creating that safe space to show up with transparency, which is liberating, folks. I mean, it's the hiding that causes the shame and the discomfort and the disconnection. It's being transparent that is so very liberating, and in my opinion, I think can create a lot of intimacy in a relationship, because you're saying, look, like, here's my stuff, I don't feel that great about it, I'm going to share with you that I don't feel that great about it, and I need your support, and I'm sharing this with you because I trust you. So there are great opportunities to develop and deepen intimacy in the relationship when you have these discussions. I love, love, love it.
And it is that sense of we seem to sort of know this, but nobody's perfect. We say it all the time. We crochet it on napkins and hang it on the wall like we totally believe it. But then when we're in the crux of the situation, we actually avoid the reality. Like, we don't give ourselves the opportunity to actually fall under that banner and say, you know what, they're not perfect, I'm not perfect. Okay, but if I bring myself and my honesty into this, it will be fruitful and rewarding. And vulnerability, I always say, like, this maybe as an aside, it's the fatherly side of me, but when I had like a newborn baby, that baby can't do a lot of wrong. I love that baby, but the worst it can do is sort of cry because it's hungry. But now I got terrible twos is a very real deal with my wild child. Now she has the opportunity to do some very bad things. She can color on walls. She can poop on carpets. Like, it's very real in our house. But because of that opportunity for her to do something very wrong, in a sense, when she comes and does something that's very loving, I feel a deeper sense of love for her now, because she has the opportunity for the choice. And it's so true in a relationship as well. If you come and you're always perfect and there's never any bad days, sure, the relationship could be rewarding, but the depth of it isn't going to be to that level. Everybody who walks through a very traumatic event, when they retell that story of walking through an event, it is deep seated that they actually feel, bound together by walking through that together. And it's true in finances. It might not be to the same depth of someone maybe, overcoming a serious cancer or illness or something. But it definitely is the truth that it's like, hey, I'm terrible, but the sense of honesty will actually make you stronger in your relationship because it's a sense of vulnerability.
Yeah, that feeling of safe, and that you're showing up and trusting in the other person, and then in turn, they have their back. It's not like I've screwed up and we're done, which you referred to the shoot earlier, which unfortunately I think a lot of people struggle with right now in the dating realm, because we have all these apps and online sites that there's seemingly so many options that if there's something that doesn't really light us up or please us in some way, then there's another option. But I think there's so much true value in showing up and exposing all of you. And the value is in the person really that is willing to do their own work and be accountable and be honest about those. So showing up in conversation around money is a great place to start. So we're winding down in our last 15 minutes. Any of you that have been watching, if you have any questions, this is a great time to exercise that muscle of vulnerability and maybe a little transparency if you want to take advantage of having Lane on the show and ask him some questions. Now's the time to throw those up there. And Lane, if you wanted to sort of embody an overall message to someone that's dating or maybe started a relationship and they're struggling with how to even initiate the conversation with someone, what would you have to share for them?
Yeah, I would say, okay, so when I officiate, because I don't actually meet the couples until I'm in person with them, I don't do any of the administration side. I go on a lot of first dates. My wife and I have been together for 12 years. We've been married for 8. It's been a long time since I've been in the dating game, but I go a lot of first dates in the sense that I'm meeting 2 people that I've never met before for the first time. If I don't know how to ask strategic questions, could you imagine, you're going on a date. How do you prepare for a date? Well, I sort of have this list, whether I actually have mentally listed that out or if I just sort of have it in the subconscious, but I know what questions I'm going to ask. I've been on enough dates now that I'm going to say, hey, what do you like? What do you dislike? I think in that regime, that's a great place to start, is ask yourself some of those questions that you want to ask or that you want to be answered. Some of the things that we had already talked about earlier tonight. What does rich mean to you? How did you grow up with money? How do you view money? Some things like that. And then learn to ask questions to probe deeper. I think the art of the conversation is maybe been lost a little bit, that people sort of are, because it's very awkward and a very awkward topic, people are very janky about how they ask about it. Oh, how can I find out about how Andrea manages money? Well, if you don't learn how to ask strategic questions and then learn how to probe, the engaging things. Tell me a little bit more about that. Oh, that's really interesting. Can you tell me a little bit? Well, what about this? Like learn how to get those questions that draw answers out of people, and then do a self-analysis after. Okay, when he said that, he really liked cars and he's got 3 project cars on the go, but also works 2 jobs. It's like, okay, where's the free time for relationships in that? I should probably, be aware that it doesn't sound like he's going to have a lot of time to fit in relationships, and I'm going to be competing with something that is a hobby of his. So I think that that's a great place to start. Ask yourselves those questions, and then make sure that you also ask those questions or learn how to weave them into the conversation in a sense of subtlety. Don't just go like bull into a china shop. Listen, let me see your pay stub right now. I want to know. Let me see your accounts. I just open up your banking mobile app. It only takes a fingerprint. Come on, let me see.
Yeah.
Instead of saying that,
that's never
some
going
subtlety.
to go well. Yeah, some subtleties. But I love that strategic questions. So getting really clear about the things that are important to you, the things that you value, including money and finance, if that's a concern and you want to get that cleared up right off the get-go, especially if you've had an experience before, as long as you're owning your own stuff. But I love that you're bringing those questions back to yourself, because that's how we do our own cleanup surrounding what our relationship is with money in our own life. So I have a question for you. Actually, I have 3 questions for you, but I'm adding a 4th in because of the topic of conversation that we're having tonight. I'd love to hear what you think a high value man is.
Wow, I'm really not prepared for this question. I think a high value man is a man that knows what's important to him, that knows that his most valuable asset is time, knows where to spend his time. I would start with priorities. One that has their priorities in place for longevity. I've got a core set of guys that love to golf. Saturdays are for the boys. And then you kind of come to this realization that it's like, actually, my time is better spent instead of just sitting around drinking beer. I think a high value guy is somebody that actually understands that, invests in themselves, is always trying to strive and improve themselves. I don't think we ever arrive. I think when someone arrives, they just stop growing. So I think that, in the natural conversation, oh yeah, what are you reading? Nothing. Well, do you normally read? Are you just taking a little bit of a break between books, or do you just never read? Nah, I watch a lot of TV. I play a lot of video games. Okay, like I guess, but I want somebody who actually, learns how to be happy, knows what satisfaction is, and isn't striving to be impressed or to try and impress somebody that will never be impressed with who they are. Have you seen The Greatest Showman, the movie?
No, not yet.
Oh, you should watch it. It's fantastic. But there's a prime example. I won't spoil it for you, but there's a prime example where Hugh Jackman thinks that if he can just get to this certain status, he'll get his father-in-law's approval. And then when he gets to this certain status, he still doesn't have that approval. And that's just the reality of it, that you understand that who you're trying to impress. I guess what I'm trying to say is that you are improving yourself, but you're not sort of like a negative Nancy when you haven't arrived.
Yeah, our value is within ourselves, and that's where we should be nurturing instead of acquiring things, for sure. So I invite everyone that's watching either right now or watching the replay after. It's been fascinating asking this question, not only to myself, but to other people, what a high value person is, or a high value man or a high value woman, and what that means. And it's very revealing, not only to yourself, but it's a great question to ask someone that you're dating, because you hear very quickly whether or not you're in alignment in a lot of things as well. So here are my other three questions, Lane, that I ask everyone at the end of every Love Talks is, I'm a big fan of expanding love in your life through an expression of gratitude. So if there were three things in your life right now that you are most grateful for, what would they be?
The number one would just be the patience that my wife has had with me. When I was younger, I heard lots of guys say, "Oh man, I'm just such an idiot," and my wife, is just so gracious to me. And I just always thought, stop being an idiot, stop making dumb choices. And now that I'm here, I realize, there's some days that I make some poor choices still, and I have really stretched her to her capacity, moving lots, building homes, growing businesses. And she's been right by my side. And I can definitely say, to sort of tie a little bit back on, high value person, I think what set my wife apart, because I dated lots before I met my wife, what set her apart is the confidence that she had in her self-worth. At our first date, it was supposed to be an hour at Starbucks. It turned into 4 at Starbucks. Starbucks closed, which turned into 2 hours at the beach. And then at the end of the whole conversation, she looked me dead in the face and she said, "Listen, where's this going? Because if it's not going somewhere, I don't want to be a part of it. If you're just going to waste my time, I don't want to be a part of it." And I thought, wow, she knows what her time is worth, what her value is. And I just thought, this is the one. In that moment, I was like, yep, she's so different and confident to any woman I've dated. So I'm most gracious and grateful for her. And then I would say my kids, they put a smile on my face. I've turned into a horrible puddle of a man now, that when I'm standing at the altar and I'm going to perform a wedding and there's a bride walking down with a dad and they're crying, you'll see me looking off in the distance, because I think, just don't look, or you're just going to absolutely weep. They've turned me into the biggest softie ever. I know lots of people that have struggled to get pregnant, and we haven't had any problems with that. And kids are a blessing. They're a lot of work, but they are a blessing. And so I count that blessing every day. They put a smile on my face. I absolutely love being a parent. And the last thing I would say is the friendships that I have. I think, and this, sort of ties to what we were saying about being a bridesmaid in a wedding. I had a lot of relationships that I thought I would have long after graduating that have fallen away. People that I would never think, a good friend of mine ended up divorcing with his wife, left 3 kids behind. And I was like, this guy's rock solid. He would never do anything wrong. And it was really surprising to me. And I think at the, trial by fire, going through some of the seasons of life and recognizing the relationships that are with me now, these ones are going to be the ones that stick the longevity. They add value to my life. They let me add value to their life, which is a great honor that I have. And I know that they're going to be around for a long time. So they're valuable people. So I count myself very blessed to have good people in my life building into me and encouraging me to pursue my dreams. So it's awesome.
That's wonderful. I love it. And they're all relationship driven, which is beautiful. So my next question for you is, especially maybe around the topic that we've been talking about tonight, but if something else resonates loudly for you, if there's one thing in your journey to this point in life that you know for sure, that is what?
Change is inevitable. Um, where I think a lot of people think like, oh, I just need to arrive and I will have mastered this. And that's just not the truth, because right around the corner, something else is coming that's going to require you to be a constant learner, a constant student. I think when we have the audacity to think that we're perfect at something, that we're the master, that we're the best at this, I think that it's actually very off-putting to a lot of people. It's that humble attitude to say, I don't know everything. The willingness to ask for help. And just because something else is coming, and if you're standing with your feet planted, you're going to be looking at the past thinking, man, those were the golden days. I wish I could go back to that. And the reality is there's more life to be lived ahead of you than there is behind you. Your best days are ahead of you, but only if you believe it.
Amazing. Love that. And finally, the last one's a doozy. Tell me what's your definition of love?
I would say now I get the benefit of drawing on all the relationships that I do ask these questions when I'm interviewing couples to see if I'm going to do their wedding, is, what sets this person apart? And it's really forced me to ask that question about what set my wife apart. And I think it's the sense that I can be around that person, not feel like I need to actually put my very best stories forward. Before I met my wife, I jumped from relationship to relationship, and I would tell all my very best story. Here's all my accolades. Here's the best parts about me. And then as soon as we got to that teetering point where I'm like, like she's already heard that story. Like she already knows that I won that award. It's like, ooh, you know what? This has run its course. I'm going to go find somebody else, because I was running on that high of someone just finding me infatuating. And so that's where I think love comes in, is that I can be, fully transparent. I can be myself. It's like a good pair of jeans. When I put them on, I feel like myself. I don't need to put a facade up. I don't need to bring my best stories. We could go on a 6-hour road trip and not talk the whole time, or we could be busy building a business for a year, take a week off, and laugh about the funniest things. And so I think it's what you have in common, and it's that sense of comfort and safety.
Yeah, and it sounds like acceptance too, which is so beautiful. That's wonderful. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for everything that you've shared this evening. I'd love for people to know what you're up to next. Is there anything that you'd like to share with everyone before we say goodbye for the night?
I'm working on a couple of things. I am rolling around the idea of actually doing a bit more training around how we can turn millennials into the richest generation that Canada's ever seen. If people want to get in touch with me, I don't just work with millennials, but millennials are the first generation that are going to rival baby boomers in size, and they're going to inherit baby boomers' money. And baby boomers were the first ones to recover after Black Monday and after the dirty 30s of the Industrial Revolution. So baby boomers are currently the wealthiest generation that we've ever seen, and millennials will be that next generation. But I target them in particular because schools aren't teaching this, parents aren't teaching the basics about finances. And so I actually want to look at putting together a video series talking about the different vehicles, explaining the value of a TFSA, explaining the value of an RRSP, trying to actually give value and tools and resources into the hands of young people so that they can actually strategically position themselves to inherit a massive amount of wealth, but be prepared to take it. What do they always say? The taller the taller the building, the deeper the foundation. That's exactly what I want to do. I want millennials to be deep rooted, understand the basics, so that when they get the opportunity to use very complex products, that they're prepared to use them and master them so that they can amass a huge amount of wealth, with a secret hope that because we live in one of the richest nations in the world, that people would actually turn the opportunity to be generous on, because they understand that they actually live and have the opportunity to make a huge amount of wealth, and other countries in the world could desperately use these dollars to transform hundreds and hundreds and thousands of lives. So
Amazing. I love it. That's
Yeah.
a great purpose and mission to be on. So thank you for sharing that. So what we'll do, everybody, once we wrap tonight is we'll share some links in the comments below the video so you know where to find Lane and can follow him as he drives this mission forward into the future, and want to join in if you need to. Looks like Vanessa's excited about what you're going to be up to, so I'm sure lots of people will be connecting with you post-show. Thank you so much again for being here tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It's a huge honor. Anytime that I get any platform, regardless of the size, I truly just want people to be successful. And I mean, you wouldn't really see this until we work together on an actual financial plan, but I sidestep the opportunity to make a lot of money by selling products that people don't need, to take that approach of what do you actually want to accomplish? Let's cut off all the other, unnecessary features to make sure that your money is as powerful as possible. So I find that sometimes people don't have the confidence to maybe come out and ask their questions in a group setting because of maybe pride or maybe shame. So please send me an email. I would be happy to answer any questions that people have or connect in any way to help them succeed.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you again so much, Lane. Stay tuned over on my business page, Andrea Hill Date by Design on Facebook, so you can see what we've got coming up for both July and August. I have wonderful guests coming in to have more deeply expanding and eye-opening and heart-opening conversations surrounding relationship and your romantic life. So until next time, I'm Andrea Hill saying thank you so much and sending you big, big love.
Bye.